Welcome to Throne of Thunder. This is going to be a raid finder guide for the bosses, focusing primarily on the tanking aspect of the fights. The first boss in Throne of Thunder is Jin Rock the Breaker. It's a fairly straightforward and simple fight, pretty good for the entry into Throne of Thunder, and really doesn't require too much from the tanking aspect. He applies a debuff on the main tank, which actually does not increase the damage the tank actually tanks, but instead causes an electrical pulse to shoot out from the tank every time the tank is hit by an auto attack from the boss. In other words, it does a lot of raid damage. So the way to avoid this is simply to taunt off. One thing to note about the ability is that it does a lot of damage at first and then peters off. Notice a countdown on the debuff. The lower the number is, the lower the damage it will do, which occasionally you will have to tank the boss with the debuff still active on you. As long as the number is fairly low, it's not that much to worry about. Around 30 seconds into the fight, Jin Rock will actually pick up his main tank and chuck him at one of the 4 statues that is in the area where you're fighting him. This will break open the statue and cause a puddle of water to start forming. The tank will also be stunned for a little while. Don't worry, it'll wear off. Just move back to the boss when it's done. The goal of the fight is to stand the DPS and the healers in the water so that they're getting a large boost to their damage and their healing. As far as positioning goes, the simplest thing to do is to simply sit the boss in the middle. Some people prefer to pull the boss to the water, which is an option. However, it is not necessary and will not increase DPS by that large of an amount. So it is simply a matter of personal preference. After the pool of water has been out for about a minute or so, Jin Rock will begin casting a lightning storm. This is mainly something for healers to worry about, as it really won't hit the tanks very hard, but it does deal a lot of raid-wide damage, so simply stack up to make things easy. The important thing is to get out of the water when this happens, as this will electrify the water, causing you to lose the buff and take a lot of damage from standing in it. As far as tanking goes, this is all you really need to know for the fight. On a side note, for healers and DPS, the boss will also summon up a little electrical orb. Jin Rock will create a small ad that is not killable or attackable, called a Focused Lightning. This will pick a random player and chase them down and explode when it reaches them. Important things to note about this is that it leaves an electrical fissure on the ground that continues to deal a fair amount of damage. So of course, whoever gets this Focused Lightning chasing them needs to move away from the raid group. These lightning fissures will also explode and deal raid-wide damage if they touch any other lightning fissures, or if they touch the water. So they need to be kited out and away from the raid group, and dropped far enough apart that they will not actually touch each other. And that sums up Jin Rock the Breaker. The second boss in Throne of Thunder is a giant triceratops known as Horodon. This is a rather long boss fight which includes a lot of ad killing. For DPS out there who may be watching this, ads always take priority over Horodon. When you first enter the room, the first gate that will open, which will be spawning a lot of ads, is the Faraki tribe gate directly to your left. These ads will drop sand pits on the ground, which simply you just don't want to stand in. As for Horodon's own abilities, he has a stacking debuff that he will apply on the tank called Triple Puncture. You don't really need to worry too much about when to swap off, as you will actually tank swap during specific portions in the fight, regardless of your current stacks at the time. Horodon also has an ability called Double Swipe, which basically does a large cone emanating from in front of him and behind him, so don't stand at his tail, DPS and healers. Simply sidestep out of this to avoid getting hit. He will also pick random people and charge them and immediately do a double swipe. This is not really something the tank has to worry about. Horodon will simply do it. Don't go chasing after him, he will come back to you. As for his positioning goes for the boss, you want to position him fairly close to the gate, but facing sideways to it. That way no one in front of the gate who will be killing ads will have to worry about his double swipe ability, unless of course he charges them. After a little while of killing ads, a large ad will appear called a Dinomancer. This ad should of course be picked up quickly and killed with priority to all the other ads. This ad has an ability called Mend Dino that should be interrupted, as it heals Horadon for a fair amount. When the ad is brought to about 50% or so, he will drop an Orb of Control, which someone should immediately click on. This will mind control Horadon briefly, and cause him to ram the gate, destroying it and stopping the ads from spawning at that location. It's roughly at this point to where it's a good idea for the tank that was tanking all of the ads to taunt Horadon and begin moving to the next gate. The gates open in a clockwise direction while moving around the amphitheater. One trick I prefer to use is simply to taunt and immediately run to the next gate. Horadon will still be stunned for a few seconds and will not immediately chase after you. This gives you time to get all the way to the next gate. After that, it's simply rinse and repeat for all 4 gates. One tank simply picks up all the ads, the other tank holds Horadon. Interesting things to note about the ads in each respective gate are mainly one ability that you have to worry about. The first gate, the Faraki gate, will drop sand traps on the ground that you don't want to stand in. The second gate will shoot out periodically poison bolts, which is simply a lot of damage that generally has to be healed through. The third gate, the ads will drop out frozen orbs, which will deal a lot of frost damage to anyone near them. Simply don't stand near them. The fourth gate, the ads will drop lightning nova totems, which again, simply try not to stand near them. Once Horadon is brought down to around 30 to 35% HP, the War God Jalak will drop down and run into the arena. He takes priority over any other ads as he hits not only the tank rather hard, but also AoEs rather hard as well. He does not have a lot of HP and should be burned down rather quickly though. Right as the War God spawns, it's usually a good idea to do a tank swap right then, as generally the tank who was tanking Horadon will have several stacks of the triple puncture, and this simply gives less for the healers to worry about. Once the final gate goes down, it is usually a good idea to pull Horadon into the middle of the arena, giving plenty of room to move around and making sure you move away from any frozen orbs or lightning totems that may still be in place. Horadon will also enrage when the War God Jalak dies, gaining an increase in damage, so be prepared for that. A couple tips for handling the ads is number 1, don't panic. Mobs will drop down from multiple locations, so it can be very difficult to just run around and pick everything up. The rule of thumb is, the bigger the ad, the bigger priority it is that you have aggro on it. Don't panic, and don't worry about it too much if you're having trouble holding threat on everything. And that sums up the second boss fight in Throne of Thunder, Horadon. The third boss in the first Throne of Thunder raid finder is the Council of Elders. This is actually 4 bosses that do not, for once, actually share a health pool. The generally accepted strategy is to simply burn Sool the Sandcrawler first. As long as he is burned first, you never have to worry about him becoming empowered, and therefore you don't have to worry about the nastiest ability in this boss fight. Of the 4 bosses, one tank should pick up Sool and Malak, and the other tank should pick up Marley. Bear in mind that Sool and Marley will be casting primarily, and therefore in order to move them, one must first interrupt their ability and then move them, or else they will simply stand there and cast at the tank. Sool, on the other hand, targets random players with his ability, and really deals very little damage by himself to the tank. The primary mechanic in this boss fight is the empowerment effect. This always starts on the Frost King Malak. I'll talk more on the empowerment in a moment. There's really only a couple things to really worry about in this fight. Sool will drop sand pits that obviously do not want to stand in. If you stand in too long, you will become rooted and stuck in it. And the most dangerous ability on the tanks is an ability that Frost King Malak has called Frigid Assault. When this occurs, he will begin stacking a debuff on whoever is tanking him, and when this debuff reaches 15, the tank will be stunned for 15 seconds. Needless to say, you'll begin taking a lot of damage during that time. It is also important to note that stun breakers, such as a Death Knight's Icebound Fortitude, a Brewmaster's Nimble Brew, will not break this stun. This stun is unbreakable, you have to eat it. The way to beat this stun is to simply have the other tank taunt off and take Malak. Now this brings me to the next ability that you have to worry about, and this comes from Marley. Normally she only casts a very low damaging spell and really doesn't require a whole lot of attention. Periodically, however, she will summon up a Blessed Loa Spirit. This will immediately move toward the boss with the lowest HP, excluding Marley herself, and if it reaches them, will heal them for 5% of their maximum health. That's a big heal on these bosses. These spirits don't have too much HP and are slowable, stunnable, and rootable, so it's a very good idea to simply kill them before they reach the boss. As most strategies involve burning Soul first, he will 90% of the time be the one that the Blessed Spirit is chasing. The exception to this is with Malak being the first one empowered. To deal with the actual empowerment, you must deal 25% of the boss's HP. When 25% of the HP is dealt, the empowerment jumps. One of the largest causes for wipes is people becoming a little too enthusiastic at burning Soul down and ignoring Malak. When a boss is empowered, he will be gaining stacks of dark energy. When they reach 100%, they will begin pulsing out an AoE that doesn't deal a lot of damage at first, but very quickly ramps up to being a raid wipe. Thus, it's a good idea, since Soul and Malak will be stacked, to be doing a lot of cleaves, multi-dotting, or simply tab targeting periodically to make sure that he gets close to 75% HP. Now Marley, when she becomes empowered, she loses the ability to summon Blessed Loa Spirits, meaning you no longer have to worry about killing the spirits before they reach other bosses to heal them. She will instead summon Shadowed Loa Spirits, which will chase players. If they reach a player, it's an insta-death. They will instantly kill the player. So make sure to kill those or else people will start dying. However, this means that there is no longer any compunction against stacking the bosses, and thus it's usually a good idea to run over and stack all the bosses on top of each other during this time. Now if, on the off chance that Soul becomes empowered, he will summon up living sand from every pool of sand that he's put out on the ground. These adds do hit very hard and need to be AoE'd down very quickly. Usually, since he's burned down quickly though, you very rarely will have to deal with him. The last boss, Khazrajin, since he doesn't need to be tanked and is mostly ignorable, requires virtually no attention from the tanks. One thing for the healers to note is that while he is empowered, he will be reflecting damage that he takes back at the players who damage him, therefore simply be prepared for this. As for other abilities to pay attention to, Frost King Malak will periodically shroud a player in ice with an ability called Biting Cold. They will simply pulse out frost damage, so simply don't stand near any other players. Khazrajin will be, of course, jumping around like a crazy person this whole fight, and simply stay out of his way if at all possible. And that sums up the Council of the Elders boss fight, as well as the first raid finder for Throne of Thunder. Thanks for watching, and I hope this guide helps.